Thank you all for being here, and we're gathered upon the almost immediate return from Azerbaijan, where Congressman Pallone and I have been for the last 3 days, and we felt that in addition to climate issues, that the human rights situation in Azerbaijan was an issue that should also have attention drawn to it. So we did that. And while those nations of the world gathered in Baku to discuss climate action, we could not ignore the climate of fear and repression just outside the conference walls. No nation is perfect, and the United States has its challenges as well. But Azerbaijan's record on human rights is deeply concerning, and it is getting worse. Human Rights Watch has consistently reported Azerbaijan's appalling human rights record, with abuses escalating through 2024. Freedom House ranks Azerbaijan with a democracy percentage of just 1% and a global freedom score of 7 out of 100. The U.S. State Department's most recent human rights report corroborates these findings, detailing unlawful killings, torture, and severe restrictions on the rights of freedom of expression, assembly, and association in Azerbaijan. That is why last month, Congressman Pallone and I, along with 60 of our colleagues, urged Secretary of State Blinken to press for the immediate and unconditional release of all political prisoners, hostages, and POWs, including ethnic Armenians. On November 11th, just last week, Freedom House released a new report with its finding that the Azerbaijani regime engaged in ethnic cleansing against the ethnic Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh in 2023. This report provided new evidence for a reality that is already widely held in the international community. There are 23 Armenian prisoners that Azerbaijan admits to holding, including former presidents, prime ministers, and leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh. But many more remain missing or are unaccounted for. Despite overwhelming evidence and international condemnation, Azerbaijan has not faced meaningful consequences for its actions against Armenians. Last month, Human Rights Watch released yet another report finding that Azerbaijan has had a poor human rights record for many years, with the government regularly targeting those who play important watchdog roles in society, including human rights defenders, journalists, and independent civic activists. This repression appears to have worsened as we neared the COP29 International Climate Conference. As the New York Times reported recently, the Azerbaijan government has locked up dozens of activists and journalists in what experts describe as the country's most aggressive campaign of repression in years. Human rights experts say Azerbaijan President Aliyev appears to be eliminating what little is left of the independent civil society and the free press. COP29 in Azerbaijan offered a unique opportunity to promote clean energy and regional cooperation. But it is critical for the United States to address the significant challenges posed by ongoing human rights violations and unresolved territorial conflicts in Azerbaijan. We must draw attention to Azerbaijan's unacceptable human rights record and promote positive change. We cannot be silent. We cannot ignore the hostile climate in which the conference is right now still taking place. While I was there, I met in person with Mr. Hikmet Hajiev, who is the foreign policy advisor to President Aliyev. We had a frank and honest exchange of views. It became clear to me that to achieve peace in the region, both Azerbaijan and Armenia need to move beyond the past and onto a brighter future for their people. Just as was done in other countries, so too that must happen in Azerbaijan and Armenia. It won't be easy, but it can be done. It must be done. So what I said to the foreign policy minister was the Azerbaijani government must immediately and unconditionally release all Armenian and Azeri political prisoners, guarantee the right of return for ethnic Armenian civilians to Nagorno-Karabakh, and negotiate in good faith a peace agreement with Armenia that protects regional peace and internationally agreed upon borders. And I'm going to continue with Congressman Pallone to continue to call out and condemn Azerbaijan's greenwashing campaign and its plans to continue expanding and growing its oil and gas production as well. We just can't allow these authoritarian petrostates to ignore both the human rights and the climate threats that have to be addressed in a comprehensive way. And it was my great honor to be on this journey to Azerbaijan with this historically a great leader for the rights of the Armenian people, no matter where they live, Frank Pallone from New Jersey.
Well, I was never called historic before. Thank you, Senator. And I do want you to know, because I'm just going to basically lay out the events here of what happened from my perspective, that it was clear to me that some of these protesters were, after Senator Markey as well, although I seemed to be the main target of what they were doing. What I wanted to say is that I just wanted everyone to understand by way of background, and I'll try not to be too long. When we were at the climate conference COP in Dubai last year, we found out, it was kind of a late development as far as I knew, that this next COP was going to be in Baku. I found out about it, and I think it was even announced as we were leaving Dubai. And it was clear at the time that it never would have taken place in Baku, in Azerbaijan, if it weren't for the fact that the Armenian government agreed to it. And it was a gesture on the part of the Armenian government because they thought it was an opportunity to perhaps highlight and come to a peace agreement and have the release of prisoners, particularly those who had been involved in the leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh. And so, and that was the background to my going as well this year. In other words, a few weeks ago, we had been in touch with Armenian leadership, and we had been in touch with some of the U.S. representatives, at the State Department and at the embassy in Baku, and everyone felt that that this was an opportunity. In other words, that there was some talk about the Prime Minister of Armenia going to the conference, Armenia sending a delegation to the conference, that with the idea that maybe there would be some of the prisoners released, and this would be an opportunity for Azerbaijan to, in fact, show, we are going to abide by certain international norms, and we're going to try to be a good guy, so to speak. And so it was somewhat surprising to me, maybe I'm naive, and I think it was surprising to the State Department as well, that things deteriorated, as Senator Markey said, so rapidly, even to the point where a couple of days before the conference, President Aliyev started attacking the French, started attacking the Dutch, to the point where they didn't even come to the conference, and started cranking down even more, if that's possible, on human rights and jailing more prisoners. It was exactly what happened. Was exactly the opposite of what I think the Armenian government and I thought, and our own State Department thought, would happen. Instead of becoming an opportunity to actually move towards a peace agreement, to release the prisoners, to do the other things that we talked about, now Aliyev and the government were going in the exact opposite direction. I don't know why. I think it was incredibly stupid, but that's the reality in terms of what we expected. So as the Senator mentioned, we had about 60 House and Senate members, bipartisan, on this letter outlining the goals. But the main thing that I was concerned about and continue to be concerned about is a further aggression, right? In other words, we know that that Azerbaijani troops are in part of Armenian territory. We know that Aliyev has talked about, seizing southern part of Armenia if, things don't go his way. And so what I had talked to my colleagues about during the CODEL, because this was a bipartisan CODEL, there were more Republicans than Democrats, was the fact that when we talked to Aliyev, we had asked to meet with Aliyev, we asked to meet with the foreign minister, we asked to meet with all these officials, and it turned out, as we got closer to going, that we didn't even know if we were going to meet with any of them, and the only one that they did meet with was the president. But the idea was to really stress that we want conflict to end in this region. We want the parties to come to an agreement. We don't want more military aggression on the part of Azerbaijan. And so when I got there, I was surprised. I don't want to keep talking about it, but it's sort of like an exercise in what despots do, right? The media was saying, Pallone was the one that started the fight, so to speak, right? Well, I mean, that in Azerbaijan, there's no free media. The media is totally controlled by the state. So when you arrive at the conference, as I did, and there are 20, 30 seemingly reporters, and I don't even know if there were, who are calling your names and synchronizing what they say with their iPhones, right? Because they all said the same thing. It was all on their iPhones, right? And then, start, gesturing towards what I thought was going to be an assault on me. That this is orchestrated by the government. That's what this was all about. In order to make a point that, we don't want you here, and we don't want you, articulating the concerns that you have that were in our letter. And then, this happened consistently on the first day on the day that I was at the conference, at least twice or three times. Then we went back to the hotel, and at the hotel was just protesters or, thugs, in my opinion. It wasn't the so-called media there. There were even more. There might have been 50 or so. And there, it was clear that they wanted, they wanted to assault me. I mean, there was no question. If it wasn't for the fact that the security that the embassy hired protected me, I would have been in the hospital. And it was serious. I just want to be honest. It was very serious. And again, as we approached the hotel, which is owned by the government, Marriott is owned by the government, the police had notified, our security or whoever at the embassy that we were not allowed to go around the back of the hotel. We had to go through the main entrance, which is where the protesters were, because this was all orchestrated. Now, I don't want to keep talking, but I do want to say this. The next day, Aliyev did meet with the House delegation. I was specifically told that I could not attend, otherwise the meeting wasn't going to take place. And some people have said to me, well, why did you let the meeting take place? Because you probably could have, told other members of the CODEL not to go. They actually were willing not to go if I had told them. But I thought that was a mistake and that they could go there and articulate basically my position. And they did, all right? So they articulated a lot of the things that you talked about. But the most important was, and it was sort of interesting, I think, the most important thing was that, we're going to have a new president, dare I mention his name, and that he does not want conflict. He wants peace in this area, right? And therefore said to the president, you cannot start another war, you cannot be aggressive against Armenia, you have to come to a peace agreement, and it would involve, releasing the prisoners. And, of course, he responded totally, this is not my fault, Armenia is the aggressor, there's separatists that wanted to break up our country. He did not, he suggested, of course, that he'd be willing to have a peace and doesn't want to be an aggressor anymore, but he blamed Armenia for the war, he blamed Armenia for everything, right? So this was not a situation where there was any reason to believe that President Aliyev is moving towards some kind of peaceful settlement of this or releasing the prisoners, anything of that nature. So I just want to stress that we did have an opportunity through the CODEL, not me, but through my efforts, to make the point, and it was essentially rejected. So I don't know where we go from here, but the bottom line is that we're going to keep trying, right? We're not giving up. Obviously, Armenian government is not giving up, and we're going to still demand, as we do today here, that these concerns be addressed. And that means the political prisoners are released, the troops leave Armenia, you come to the table with a peace agreement that delineates the boundaries. I don't know why that's even an issue, because boundaries existed during the Soviet era of the republics. And you say that military action is not going to be the way to achieve it. And of course, it would be the best thing possible for Azerbaijan, because then they would have, I mean, let's face it, we all believe that the best thing possible is for the Caucasus nations to work together for transportation, economic, all the other reasons. And I just really want to stress that the idea here was to achieve a positive goal. And unfortunately, that was rejected.